And welcome to very soggy Southern Ontario. Doing kind of a follow-up to what I was doing last week. I did a self-portrait, and this week I had a lot of requests from following that one to deal with darker skin tones. So I have found a really nice image on pixabay.com, and I'm going to be working from that. So let's head on over and see what we're going to do. So this is my reference, and this is the self-portrait that I did last week. I had a number of streaming issues last week, and I've really tried to make sure that I got all of the everything cleared out of my computer. All my cache is cleared out, and I've turned off everything using the Wi-Fi except for hopefully just my computer. So hopefully that's going to solve, and we will have a very smooth streaming demo today. So if you want to if you missed this one and you want to look back on it, the link to this particular demo is in the description underneath this video. So let's set that one aside and take a look at this one. So this one's from pixabay.com. I believe it's an AI generated image, but it's very realistic, as you can tell. And I really liked the facial structure, the lighting, the way that I'm able to easily see where the lights and darks are. Now, obviously, because we are working with much darker skin tones, we're going to be using more paint, probably different colors. In my demo last week, I kind of painted it as if it were like a piece of paper would go through a printer. I did the cyan, then the magenta, and then the yellow, and I kind of worked it that way. And I'll do something similar this time. I'll be working more from my darks to my lights, which is a little backwards from the way that you usually work in watercolor. But I'll be working from my darks so that I can establish right from the very start where the shadows and the structures are. Because without those being correct, you're kind of wasting all of your time with with all the details. You could have the perfect eyes, but if you don't have the facial structure right, it's kind of a waste of time. So, full disclosure here, what I have done is I've printed this off, and I put a piece of graphite paper, some of this stuff in between, and traced the outline. For an exercise like this, I think it's fine to do. I have no problem with establishing a correct drawing in the first place. One of the difficulties you're going to run into with actually painting a good likeness is starting off with a bad drawing. So this is one way that you can be assured that your drawing is fairly accurate. So I'm going to keep this image up here in the top left corner so that you can see that. I am working on a piece of Arches 140-pound cold press paper. For my other demo, I was using Bauhong paper. This time I'm going to be using Arches. And it's the paper I usually use, and it's the one I'm most comfortable with. My paints are mainly Da Vinci watercolor, and before I started, I softened up all of these paints in order to get them nice and creamy for working. So, looking at our reference, I'm seeing lots of stronger skin tone shadows, and I want to get those in there. Obviously, the hat and the jacket are also very dark. So I want to go in with something fairly dark. Now, last time we started with cerulean blue. This time I want to start with something a little bit more in the purple tones, but I also want to start quite dark. All right, so I'm going to take. I could take neutral tint. That would be a good option. Yeah, I'll do neutral tint, which is a little on the purple side. If you don't have neutral tint, don't worry about it. You can take Payne's gray and put some red in it, and you end up with a very dark purple, or like a purple dark. So I'm going to use neutral tint. I'm going to fill my brush. I want to make sure that I am using fluid paint because I'm going to be working on dry paper. So the very first thing I want to establish is the darkest darks. Not these ones in here. I don't think I want to put a lot of this color in here. So I'm going to start off with some of these darker darks in here. When you are working with something that is extra dark, you may want to establish some of your, not detail, but you want to establish, some of the lines that you don't want to lose. So for example, the ribbing on this hat, I might put that in and let it dry, and then I'll put a wash over top, and then I won't lose those pencil lines. One of the difficulties that I've run into in the past with painting things that are very dark, it could be a still life. It doesn't have to be a portrait, but whenever you're painting something dark, if you put the dark wash on, it's like, oh, where did my pencil lines go? And then you're in a little bit of trouble. So anyway. So I'm going to establish where the ribbing is on this hat, and that's more just so that I don't lose my pencil lines. Okay, so that's it. And it's also a little bit dark right along the edge here, so I'll just go along the edge here with my brush. Now, of course, it's quite dark on the, let me zoom out a little bit here. It's quite dark along the side of the face here, so I can come in with some color here and get that established. Same with the other side. It's quite dark on this left-hand side. Now, one thing I like about neutral tint is that it is a color, and it actually is a paint color you can buy, but it is a softer gray, I find, than Payne's gray. Payne's gray is really nice, but and it's great for getting really good darks right off the bat. But I tend not to use it too much just by itself. It's kind of a cool gray. And I find that the neutral tint's more of a warm gray. So as you can see, I am going around and finding some of these darks that I don't want to lose. Right? Some of these marks on the paper. And I'm not going to fuss too much with the clothing and all of that sort of thing, but I do want to know where it is. So just establishing some of the crinkles in the fabric and things like that. Now I guess this is like a fake fur hat of some sort. So we have a lot of sort of texture and dark up here in the hat section. This person looks like they have snow on their jacket and their hat. I don't want to get into too much of that, but I want to get the texture of this fake fur. So I'm kind of looking at the direction and not spending too much time on it, but I want to get a little bit of this, the idea of the fur in here, the direction that it's going, that sort of thing. All right, so not going to fuss too much there. I'm going to come around this other side, come down. There's an area around the beard that's quite dark. And you can see I'm not worried about things like, oh, there's brush marks in there and that sort of thing. Not at this stage. I definitely have some building up to do. This is really just sort of a bit of an underpainting, well, kind of sketching really with my brush. Dark purple shadows? Yep. That's, well, the neutral tint is actually a gray, but it leans more towards a purple. So I'm going to do some purples when I get into the skin tones, but for some of these extra darks, I'm just going to use the neutral tint. And it's kind of a hang in there, you'll see where I'm going with this kind of thing. I don't want the beard to look like it's cut out, so I want to make sure that I'm getting at least something of a rougher texture along the bottom of the beard. And again, I'm working with a squirrel hair brush here. This one, the numbers are all worn off. I think it's a 10 that I'm using. Just for reference, it's about the size of my pinky. That's how it relates to my pinky size. Pardon me. And, all right, so there's some more creases and things in the collar and whatnot. Going to go around the zipper teeth. Fill that in. And that's all pretty dark right down in here. That's not an area we're really thinking about too much. It's in the peripheral of our vision. We're going to be looking more at, of course, the portrait itself. But I'm going to establish the zipper teeth on this side as well. And I'm doing that because I just want to hint at the jacket that this person is wearing. All right, don't see any more of that. Kind of holding my brush on the end because I can get more of a loose type of stroke by doing this. And I want a loose stroke because these are areas that I don't want all the focus on. So I want to make sure that these areas don't have a lot of precise detail. I'm going to pick up a little more color here. And now that I have some of these areas sort of drawn out with my brush, I can come in and paint over, and hopefully some of those first layers will be showing through. Right, you can see when this dries that the first layers are hopefully going to be peeking through there, and I won't be lost when it comes to doing the details. I've done this many times where I've actually started painting and it's kind of like, oh gosh, I don't know where my lines are anymore, and I have to draw them in, and then I'm kind of guessing, and that's not a comfortable place to be when you're trying to get a good likeness. So I'm not going to worry too much about the snow. Maybe I'll just leave a few little white specks there to make it look resemble a little bit of snow, but you can see I'm doing this very kind of loose and free here. Okay, we don't even really need to see that that's a hat. I have a deep Sea Violet and Moonglow. They are dark purples, one more on the blue side, one more red. I also have Indigo, could mix with a light red. Yeah, there's any number of combinations that you could use. And you can mix any of those with your Payne's Gray or even a black. You know, I'm not a big fan of black because it does tend to kind of be a little bit lifeless, but yeah, there's a million and one things that you could use to create something dark. All right, so let's do a little bit more here. And now I want to take this same color and I want to warm it up a little bit so that it resembles more of a normal skin tone, right? Because this is really not going to be that neutral. So I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna, mix it in there, and I'm going to get a very dark, sort of a purple brown mixed with my neutral tint. So it's warmed up from what I used in the background. Okay, also still filling my brush, still using the big brush, and I'm thinning a really strong color just before I paint leaves in this. So I'm just going to make sure this is dry, and if I zoom in, you'll see I can actually see the lines through there. I don't know why this is looking this way. I don't know if I hit something. Is that small on the screen for you? Well, I guess it looks okay, but it looks weird on my screen. Okay. So I'm going to take this sort of, I don't know what you'd call this brown, but it's kind of a purple brown, I guess. But I want to start thinking about the carving. I'm carving out the shape of the face. So I see lots of little areas where it's extra dark. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to thin this down. I'm going to work lightly to begin with. If you've watched most of my demos that I've done in the past, I like to do kind of a thinner, like ghost-like version of this. And so I want to come in. I'm going to thin that down even more. So I'm just rinsing my brush here. I'm easing my way into this to sculpt this properly. I want to make sure that I've got the shapes the way I want them. Now I do see that there's a lighter spot above the eye, so I'm just going to leave that white paper. And I'm going to, I can soften an edge, I can dampen my brush and smooth it out and that sort of thing. And I'm going to go into the eye here as well. I'm kind of working in this whole area, so I'm going to work around the eye as well. And as I'm doing that, I need to work around the highlight in the eye. So, for example, there's a highlight at about 10 o'clock, or no, yeah, about 10 o'clock, I would say, on this eye. Now, I'm going to paint in the iris. And one thing I'm noticing is that underneath the eye here, it's a little bit wet. There's moisture in your eye, so there's a little bit of wet there. So let me just take a look. Okay, it's looking okay. It's really weird that my screen's looking the way it does. But I'm not going to play with it. I don't want to mess it up. So I can zoom in though, and I can show you what I'm working on. So underneath the eye, there's a little bit of wet underneath the eye. So for this area of wet, I need to leave the paper white. There's dark. If I bring this over close to where I'm working, I'm going to fold this, bring it over close so that I have a better perspective of what it is I need to look at. It is similar to the underpainting that I did for the portrait. Only when I did my own self-portrait, I did start with a blue. This time I'm starting with a dark that is a little bit more on the warm side. Although, if I'm talking in terms of a purple, like a purple gray, this, relative to the warm colors I'm going to be putting on, this is a cool. So it's not quite blue, but it is darker. If I started with a blue, I think it would end up just looking a little bit too bruised, maybe. So I don't want that look. I want to have this sort of richer tone for the skin. I can thin this down and create some of the, in the tear duct, it's a little bit darker in there. So I'm going to go a little darker here and just using the very tip of my brush. So I can still use this great big brush, but it has a nice point. So I can go in and still establish some detail. Now there's going to be some shading in the eye. I don't want to have it this color, so I will put that in. But this is going to help me get started for, where there's a dark area underneath the eye, that sort of thing. So I want to get those in there. And it goes from almost where the tear duct is, underneath the eye, comes back up, just about to where the end of the lash line is there. And I can rinse my brush and I can soften some of that if I want to. But even at this stage, if I didn't soften that, that would be okay. It all depends on, your painting style, what you like to try to accomplish in your painting. Are you looking for the shape, or are you looking for high realism? This is, I believe, an AI generated image, so it's copyright free in terms of like this model isn't a real person. It is an invented person. So we don't have to, pay any royalties to this person, but the contours are pretty well established for us. So I'm coming in and slowly but surely building up some layers to darken areas that I see need to be a little bit darker. I'll revisit areas and get those established. And where I see, it starts to get a little bit lighter, I need to thin this out. So I will rinse my brush and start thinning this out or blending it out, that sort of thing. There's definitely some dark on the side of the nose here. But it's not a large dark area. It's a dark area right here. I want to maybe blend that out a little bit. So I've got my paper towel here. Maybe you can't really see that I'm blotting my brush quite often. I'm blotting it in order to control how much water is in my brush. If I go back in and my brush is too wet, I'm not going to be able to soften this without creating a bunch of blossoms. So you can see I'm not making it smooth and polished or anything like that at this stage. Not that you couldn't, but I'm just not going to take the time because I'm trying to illustrate something that is a little faster. So I'm not going to take the time to do it, but you certainly could. You know, if you're a realist, I could, you know, if I'm doing a portrait, I'll spend a lot of time and I'll do a lot of layers and that sort of thing. But if I'm demonstrating something, I can get my point across with fewer strokes, with less detail, that sort of thing. And always keeping those things in mind. But because these are the important shapes, not how detailed it is or how smooth it is. What I'm establishing right now is the contours of the face. Guess I can take that off. All right, so we've got a cheekbone here coming in, and definite dark areas coming down here towards the beard, which is, this part is actually going to be quite dark right there. I can come back and revisit it a spot or two if I feel like I need to get something a little darker. I can come back in and repaint certain areas. You know, maybe I want to establish this crease in the eye a little bit darker or something like that. I don't want to get too bogged down with detail, though. I really want to stay on course. I'm sculpting a face is what I'm doing. So let's come into the other nostril here. And that's actually pretty dark right in that spot. Right there, right here where the other nostril is. Those are areas that are extra dark. So I can, you know, put in a little more paint there. It pretty much is a value study at this point. Mouse Go Cowboy. Yeah, it essentially that's what I am doing. This is similar to a grisaille type of technique where we establish the shadows, then we build on top of that and add the color. So I'm kind of doing it along those lines. This is, if you're just tuning in, this is burnt sienna and neutral tint that I'm using for a warmer, a little bit more of a brown type of shadow. And this is going to help me sort of create the shapes, but also so that I don't so I don't lose any of my pencil lines. Quick question. Someone saw one of my paintings that I had done following my tutorial. They would like to purchase it. I am not sure about the rights and things. I did explain that I did it during... Oh, okay, that's fine. If you did it during one of my demos, I have no problem with that, you know. So you are welcome to sell something that you've done from that. It is nice if you do credit me. I do appreciate it, but no, I'm not looking for any compensation for it. I just, you know, I like coming here every Wednesday and sharing this. I have a lot of fun. I actually started this during COVID. I started sharing some of my demos because I was worried that my students were going to start taking up quilting or something and give up their painting. So I decided that I would start to share some of my demos. I started on Facebook actually, but it was a bit glitchy and I was having some issues. So I switched over to YouTube, and of course I didn't know enough to make it private, and people started showing up. So that's how I ended up being here. All right, so as I come into the other eye, now I could fold this over, bring it a little closer to where I'm working, and I need to come in and get this dark in here. Now it is a little darker towards the tear duct, but there's this definite shine on the eye. You know, the eye is wet, and the lid there, you definitely see some shine on there. The skin is very smooth, I guess, under the eye, so it's got a much brighter shine on it. But let's get under this eye here and get around that tear duct and such. There's highlights, there's shine. Do you see this shine in the tear duct? I need to paint around that. That's the primary differences between watercolor and working in say acrylic or oil or something like that. You know, you could add those things in very easily in acrylic or oil, but you have to paint around them in watercolor. You know, you have to be thinking ahead and planning for those things. So I'm coming in once again. I've got this it looks like there's a little line of white under the eye, but that's actually just the wetness of the eye. You know, there's a little bit of moisture in the eye. So there's that little sliver of white that I have to leave underneath there. And I have to paint around that highlight in that tear duct. Now we're coming into the upper lid line here. And I'm not really seeing too much in the way of lashes here. There are lashes, but they're coming mostly straight towards me, so you don't see much of them when they're coming straight at you. Then we have this crease in the eye. And I'm really noticing that, you know, right in this little area right here, that it's very narrow. Like the lid line is closer to the lashes than it is, say, here on this side. So I'm really paying attention to things like that, how dark it is, whether it's a crisp line or a soft line, that type of thing. You know, I'm always kind of watching for that type of thing. And of course, this has to be darker in here, this lid. We've got a little bit more color where the brow is, of course. I'm going to open this up a bit again because this is actually going to connect to that middle section. Let me zoom out again. I zoomed in so you could see that eye, but you need to see it all kind of together at some point. I was talking to my class about this the other day, and that is that watercolor painters have this tendency to sit and paint. I mean, that's basically what we do. But the downside to that is we are not getting the same advantage as somebody who's, say, working at an easel. We're not spending enough time getting up out of our chair and stepping away so we can see the whole picture working together. You know, we kind of get tunnel vision on some of this stuff, and we don't necessarily see the forest for the trees anymore. We need to see what the whole picture looks like, not just one little area that we happen to be working on. All right, so there's a little bit of a furrowed brow going on here. So we've got sort of these little creases in the forehead. And I want to establish where those are. I don't want him to look angry, but he does have this furrowed brow. So I want to soften some of that because, of course, I don't really want hard lines there. Hard lines might imply anger. So I do want it a little bit softer. So I'm just going to brush over that. And then we have more shading up here. And I'm looking at things like this crease here and this crease right here. So I'm carving out, I'm making these forms in the forehead. It's actually creating this person's expression. So it's kind of an important thing, actually. This kind of shadow here that comes down and across. And it's pretty dark on this side. Okay, so I've got the general idea. I don't have any of the spit and polish on it yet, but I have the general idea of, you know, where there's higher points or lower points on the contours of the face. But there's a couple of questions here. My chat stopped for a bit, so I'm just scrolling back here to see any of the questions. Anyone else had this? I don't sell, so not a clue. Oh yeah, so yeah, you can sell it if you want to. Just if you plan to sell it, like for example, painting in a show. And I really need to underscore this. If you are entering something, don't go by what I say, okay? Go by the rules of the show. The show will tell you whether or not you can submit something from a class, a tutorial, whether you can submit something that's from a photo that's not your own. Read it carefully before entering anything into a competition. Don't just, I'm saying that if the show allows it, I don't have a problem with it. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that. Let me see. Hi, Shelley. I find it hard not to get into the details before finishing the underpainting. Yes, we all suffer from that one. I think we all want to get into the details. It is almost irresistible, isn't it? So all I can say is make sure you stop yourself before I go in to start putting in all the details, the lashes and whatnot. I can see there's areas I haven't touched yet. I have to go back and do those first. I'm dying to do the eyes, but I really need to try to create the shape of the lips and finish up the nose and that sort of thing. I need to get the shapes of the face first. You know, it's like you can't put shingles on a house when you haven't even got the plywood down yet. You know, you've got to build the structure first. So trying to find that there. His face is cool because of all the planes. You could almost simplify it with simple flat planes to define the shapes. Yeah, almost. And I believe what you're talking about is you could almost use a flat brush and do a cool color for the top of the nose and another color, like a warmer color for the side of the nose, that sort of thing. I like this is one way of working. It's not the only way, but absolutely. There are multiple ways that you can approach a portrait. Let me see. Lots of greetings. Let's get my scroller working here. I'm really bad at signing my work, but I write on the back so it says Shelley Pryor YouTube tutorial, and I will put your website. Oh, thank you. Okay. Then if they want, they can have it. Great. Okay, so thank you, Anne. All right, so let's continue on here. I'm using burnt sienna and neutral tint as my underpainting that I'm doing here. I'm basically warming up the neutral tint, but I'm basically working in grays, just warm grays. And now we have the rest of the nose here that I want to establish. I've got, like, there's a little bit of a line there. We've got some shading on the inside of the eye here on this side. One thing I will mention, because I run into this quite often in my classes, is that when you paint with watercolors, this is especially important to those of you that work in other mediums. When you work in watercolor, your brushes and everything, they're going to last forever, because when you work in watercolor, you're really touching the paper. All you have to do is touch the paper and the paint comes off. It will release onto your surface. So your brushes will last a very long time. The one thing I don't need to do with my brushes is bend them and press them and that sort of thing. I can, it's almost, it's like I'm painting with a feather. And so I'm being very delicate with it. That's going to do two things. It's going to preserve your brushes, for one. Secondly, it's going to keep your paper in the best possible condition. And why that's important is because as you add subsequent layers, you don't want to have your paper starting to pill up or do nasty things. You want to be able to keep your paper in good condition so that you can build on it. And I do a lot of building in my watercolors. I start off light, then I get braver as I go along, and I start adding more to it. All right, so I'm going to move on down to the lips and stuff. And you can see there's going to be a lot of salt and pepper kind of thing going on in the beard. And so I'm going to be, there's a number of ways we could do that. And when I get to that, I'll talk about it. Anna's asking, what size is my brush? It is worn off. I must use this brush a lot, but I believe it's a 10. You can't always go by the brush size though, because this is a 10, but also I believe this is a 2, and they're just about the same size. I got this one wet. This one's a 2, this one's a 10, and they're essentially the exact same size, same length, same type of hair, everything. So you can't always go by the brush size. So typically what I do is I will show you, compared to my pinky, that, that's the brush size. You do have to be careful when you get a supply list for a class, for example, and your instructor says what size and everything, if you need to confirm with them that, that you've got the right size, do it, because they might tell you one size, and then you pick up something and it's the size they said, but it's nothing like what they're using, kind of thing. So you might have to reconfirm that, depending on where you're buying your brushes from. I think different countries have the sizing different and things like that. But all right, I want to get into the lip area, and then I'll talk about the like the bit of hair on the mouth and upper lip, or on the chin and the upper lip. So for this mouth, we have a definite crease, of course, where the opening is. It is a little darker on the corners of the mouth Then in the middle. The upper lip, because it's curved, right, it comes in, it is going to be darkest nearest the crease. I'm doing the upper lip first. And there's just a little bit of highlight on the lip, so I'm just going to skip and leave a couple of little light spots in there. The bottom lip, because it is facing upward, we get a lot of light in this little area right here. So I'm going to leave that nice and light. But right in the middle here, just in the bottom part of the lip, right here is quite a dark spot. Really looking at the shape of it. And just on the one side, we're getting more shading because the light is coming more from the left, of course. And it is showing some of the creases in the lip. It gets a little bit lighter through here, but then it gets really dark as this the lip goes back towards the chin. This area below the mouth is very dark. So I'm running out of color here. I'm gonna mix a little more. All right, so now where can I start building things up a little bit? I think I put a little bit more burnt sienna in that mix, which is actually pretty good. I think I can start thinking about warming some things up. But now the beard. Okay, so for the beard, there's a number of things you could do. I could take some masking fluid and a very fine pen. I like to use like something like this, a dip pen, and I could be doing individual little hairs. I could do that, and I could save all of those whites, or I could try to paint around them, or I could use a little bit of white in the end. That would be my last choice, actually, but I could certainly do that. The reason that would be my last choice is because I find that white never looks as good as the white of the paper does. The white of the paper is a little warmer than white you get in a paint. The white paint tends to be a little more cool, almost looks a little grayish. So I'm going to now start, I'm going to put a little bit of a middle of the eye here. And the eye, where the eyelashes are, can't really see individual lashes too well, but I can see where the lash line is at least. And I'm going to put that in there. I really think I can even darken the creases in the eyelids here. All right, so now I want to Sorry, I'm reading this comment. I love her facial expressions when she talks about white paint. Yeah, you can tell it's not my favorite. Yeah, it would be my last option. But I want to talk now about going into our next value. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to use a little bit more of this same color here, and I'm going to start building some of the beers. So I was talking about things like using white paint and stuff, but I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to kind of dry brush to show some of that salt and pepper. So to dry brush, I am leaving, letting the side of the brush do the painting, and it is giving me this kind of salt and peppery look, skipping over the texture of the paper. Does it look as realistic as the photo? No, it doesn't. But I'm trying to get the impression of this, not necessarily the exactness of it. So I'm skipping over, getting some of the textures in there, and I'm really focusing more on where I can actually see some textures, not necessarily the whitest areas. And so to paint, I'm painting with this part of the brush, not the tip. All right, so I'm coming in, and now that got a little dark, I think. So I'll just take my paper towel and lift what I can. Things will get a little darker as I go along anyway, but this is just to get me started here. And see, I can get that tight curl kind of look, or at least the impression of it, with the side of my brush. Okay, I don't want to go crazy heavy with these first layers. But for the same reasons I talked about putting the ribbing on the hat and stuff, it's so I don't lose all my lines. Some of the things didn't even have lines, so it's a way of easing into some of those shadows. All right. Let's warm up now. So I'm going to go with the same sort of burnt sienna. Now, burnt sienna is a little bit too chocolate looking, so I want to warm it up a little bit more. I want to make it a little bit more on the reddish tones. So I'm going to go, I could go permanent rose, or alizarin crimson, permanent alizarin crimson, one of those. But I'm going to make it brown, but more reddish brown. But once again, I'm going to thin this down. I'm going to build up in layers. And I want to start to establish some of the warmer tones. All right, so you can see that this all of a sudden is starting to get more of that warmth in there. I'll rinse and blot my brush if I want to soften a line. I would say that there's nothing on the face here that's pure white, but there are lighter areas. So for the lighter areas, I'm just rinsing my brush and letting some of that color sort of trickle into those areas. But I like this color. This color is very much like another color that I have. This one's a Winsor Newton, and this one's called Perylene Maroon. That would be a good option. There's a number of ways you can create it. Like I said, you could use permanent rose or permanent alizarin crimson to create the same sort of warm tone. as I come around, blot my brush and blend it in, and then I'm kind of getting rid of the white paper, but not darkening it, right? I'm just softening that color, and that's what I get. So I will come in with more color as I build, but I can soften as I go. Some of these areas just get a little bit lighter, or a lot lighter in some of these cases. Rinse my brush, give it a blot. Now I'm really looking, okay, so there's some really light areas on the nose, so I've really got to make sure, I'm not even going back to my paint for this, I'm just rinsing my brush. So my brush isn't totally rinsed out, it's still got a little bit of color in there, as you can see, and that's probably just enough for some of those highlights without it being pure white paper. Same with the lip area here. I'm almost feeling like this could be almost a little more red. So I'm going to put a little more red in there and really start to establish some of the stronger skin colors here. I'm just blotting my brush so I can keep a few of these edges soft. Softening as I go. Now I'm noticing this really bright area underneath the eye. Maybe I can paint around that. Then we get nice and light on the cheek again, the protruding part of the face. The receding parts are darker. The protruding parts are lighter. They are coming out into the light. And if I feel like it's not coming out enough, like the cheekbone, for example, isn't protruding enough, I can come in and darken something. I don't have to lighten the cheek. I have to darken the dark. I'm going to rinse my brush. And yeah, there's going to be more sort of nuances that I will find as I go along. So I'm going from general shape to more specific shape. If it was a commission painting, would I have done the beard the same way? It depends, I guess, on the client. They might tell me in advance whether or not they would like to have something looser looking or not. Like if I was just doing it, if they left it up to me, no, I would spend more time. I would really make it more realistic, because that's just kind of the painter that I am. It's not the only way, but it's the kind of painter that I am, to do things more realistically. So I'm going with my burnt sienna, a little bit more of the alizarin crimson, and if a little bit of that neutral tint gets in there, that's okay too. So I'm coming in here, getting some of these darks a little bit more built up, but this time with color, and the underpainting underneath is actually kind of helping me sort things out. What is the approximate ratio of rose, permanent rose, and neutral tint? Oh gosh. Well, I guess I'm changing it all the time. You know, as I come into certain areas, it's a little bit more red. So I might shift that combination as I'm going along. So over here, I think I've got a little more alizarin crimson in there, or rose, permanent rose. I'm trying to resemble what I've got. Getting the exact ratio isn't the thing, really. It's the value more often. Angela says she would ask him to shave his beard. That'd be one way. Except that'd be a little hard since this is an AI-generated image. But I'm coming in here now on this eyebrow. Now there's a slightly lighter part right here, but it's quite dark in this crease. So I did that once, but now I'm coming back in to strengthen it, and it's really got to get a lot darker. And I quickly rinse and blot my brush so I can soften edges, because I don't want to have hard edges all over the place. I don't mind a few, but I don't need the whole thing that way. And I want to come up into some of these creases. I have the first lines in there. It's going to help me to sort out where they belong, but I need to build that up a little bit more. Let's soften that. Don't want him to look too angry. Get a stern look on his face or something like that. It's actually got quite a relaxed looking face, but I'm slowly coming in to work around the eyes. And the whites of the eyes at this point are way too light. I have to definitely do something with that. I'm going to go over the iris with this same skin tone, this brown, reddish brown that I made. And you can definitely see that little bit of wet underneath the eye. Do I find that I can do an entire painting with just one single paintbrush, despite having multiple choices of them? Yeah, I can. Because the point on this is the same as the point on my small brush. I think if you use fewer brushes, you will learn a lot more about brush control. And that's not a bad thing, really. But certainly if you're feeling really uncomfortable with it, or if I'm getting into something very specific, yeah, I'll definitely size down. But I always start with a bigger brush to begin with. That's almost a given because I want to make sure that I'm getting the the broader strokes in there in the beginning, because I don't want to get too hung up on detail early on. I also don't want to have a lot of brush marks. So if you use too small of a brush, you're going to end up with more brush marks showing in your painting. All right, let's sort out where the darks are in some of these places. A little bit more color, building things up a little bit at a time. And you can see his face is starting to get more shape. The paper is Arche, 140-pound cold press paper. I'm working, the size that I'm working is roughly 8 by 10. So I'm not working really large. I'm not working as small as I did last week on my self-portrait. But working a little bigger this time, just slightly. Rinse and blot. Soften your edges as you go. You can't let a line dry and then soften it. You have to do it as you go. Now, there's quite a light spot through here, so I can come in and darken through here, but I need to keep that extra light area there. And this is where I can start to get a little bit more subtle with some of the shading here. So you see there's a little highlight on the edge of the nostril here. So I'm painting around that, but not with a lot of color. It's pretty diluted. A little darker on the underside of the nose than it is on the, on the top. So it felt like I was kind of covering up the highlights before, but now I'm actually bringing them back because I'm bringing in more of the mid values. Yes, each layer is kind of overlapping the previous layer. It's a build kind of thing. You can see every little bit that I add in just starts to make him look a little bit more sculptural, I guess. The shapes feel a little bit more dimensional. And even without me taking time to soften all of the lines, I'm still getting a pretty good feeling for how the face is shaped. Now, I want to talk a little bit about these eyes because it's bugging me that they're so white. So they need to have a little bit of color. And I'm going to take a little bit of that color, add extra water to it. And so I'm putting a little color in the whites of the eyes. They're not pure white, not white paper. The shine in the eye is pretty white. I think that can really look quite dynamic, but the whites of the eyes are not white. And in fact, in some of these areas, they're pretty reddish looking. The blood vessels in the eye, that sort of thing. You're going to get that. The tear duct is going to add to the red in there. So I'm taking maybe a little bit more of my alizarin crimson here to create that effect. And I can definitely use a little bit of that same reddish color in the tear duct. And of course, we need more of that in the lips. So I'm going to come down here to these lips because I've been ignoring them. I feel like they're just sitting there doing nothing. But they actually have, let's get that blended in. That's a little too much bright red. And since the lip is not exactly pure white in the highlight, I can take a little bit of this really thin down color and just sort of dry brush a bit on there, and that's going to feel okay. Let's get a little more color. And reestablish some of these shadows. I don't want the darks to start disappearing on me. So I'm coming into where it's actually darker on the lip. And I'm really looking, okay, it's quite dark there. But one thing that bothers me a little bit, well, more than a little bit, it's all that white above the lip. So we need to bring down more of the skin tone into where the lip area is, leaving a little bit of that highlight above the what do they call that? The Cupid's bow? Something like that. So I'm leaving that little light right in that central part there. Trying to get rid of some of the white in that area. And I'm coming in with more of that red just to make the creases in the lip. And I'm using the tip of my brush here for the, for those creases. I'm just using smaller lines, that sort of thing. Yeah, and I can come back in and make a few things a little more red. And you can see it's just a build, build, build kind of thing. I'd say there's a little more red on the nose here, on the underside of the nose, maybe a little bit more on the right side. Now, if you're seeing my palette, I don't have very much paint there. It's wet paint, but I don't have very much color. So I'm building slow. My typical slow-mo build up kind of thing, but I'm going to come back over into some of my neutral tint, and I'm going to push back some of this shadow here. Even the white areas of the beard are not as pure white because this side is in shadow. Let's help if I actually opened up my photo here. And in fact, none of the jacket is a pure white. So, but I do find that the jacket is a little bit more blue. So I need to now, I'm going to put in a little bit of blue. I'm going to just use a cobalt here. So if I take a cobalt and the neutral tint, I'm making a cooler gray at this point. And I can come in on the jacket area and create that cooler color in the jacket. Now I can go over everything that I've done. I'm going to leave the zipper, but yeah, I can go over everything that I've done and basically the jacket's going to look cooler. But I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I might leave a couple of little spots, just I'll skip around a couple of little spots to make it look like snow on the jacket, but you know, leave a couple of little bits of white showing. But other than that, it's pretty much just going to get filled in here. All right, so let's, I'm going to take and just squiggle a little bit. So just with the very tip of my brush. Now this might be the spot where you want to take a really fine brush and play around with that or something like that. The left side is much lighter than the right on the photo. Yes, it is. So I'm going to come back in with some of the shading on the white areas, and they'll still look like they're lighter. They're just going to look like they're in shadow. They start to get a little of a cooler white, I guess, on this side. But just a few squiggles. I'm not going to put too much in here, and I really don't want to get bogged down with detail. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I could, but I don't think it's going to destroy the painting if I don't do that. As long as I get some of the shading correct, I think it's just going to be fine. A little bit of a squiggle in there. And I'm looking now to see, you know, where's it extra dark? There comes a point where the beard is that blends into the skin, and you can't even see the edge. And that happens whether you're dark skinned or light skinned. Remember when I was doing my own portrait that I said to soften the edge there, so you don't get this cardboard cutout look. So coming in here, just building up some darks. The first layering of the darks in there was so that I didn't get lost. You know, start putting washes on, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, where's my lines gone? That sort of thing. So it's good to get those established, and then you can build on that. And just using the tip. You see I'm holding my brush kind of far back, and that keeps me from getting too precise, right? And I think that that's sometimes a good thing, to get away from the preciseness. Something I need to do a little bit more of, I think, in my personal work. That mouth established a little bit more. And you know, there's a number of times I could keep coming back into some of these things and adding to it. That sort of thing. But I think those eyes could definitely start to get a little darker. I'm going to use a little neutral tint here. And if you remember from last week, I was talking about the outer part of the iris is generally darker. I don't think that there's too many exceptions to that, but the outer part of the eye on the iris is darker. So I'm going to get that established. And try to get maybe some of the tear duct area a little bit more detailed. So now I'm really getting up on the tiptoe of my brush, and I can start to pick out the detail-y parts, the higher contrast, the more detail. And that's where I want people to look. And I want, like, I like this picture because it is so, you're making eye contact with your subject. When I did my own portrait, I was looking away. My head was 3/4 turned. So I thought I'd try and do something completely different here, like straight on, dark skin, darker eyes, the beard, that sort of thing. So I was trying to make it different from what I did last time. But I can come in now and get more detail in some of these little areas here. Now this is where you could, like if you're more comfortable, you could switch to a smaller brush. Now, that's what I was afraid of. I think I should probably dry it so I don't make a mess. Let's get a paper towel too. So I'm just going to take my dryer to this so I don't keep putting my hand in this. Now, just because I did the shadows first doesn't mean that I can't come back in and reestablish them, make them darker or something like that. And I definitely see some areas I'd like to do that. This is good. I spent a good part of yesterday watching events unfold, and I will not get into any kind of politics here on my channel. That will not happen. But this morning, I was getting ready, and I had the TV turned off. I had the radio turned off. I had my YouTube closed and all of that. You know what I heard? Birds singing. And I thought, we need more of that. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful to be able to pick up a brush and lose myself in, doing a portrait or painting something and enjoying using the other part of my brain, Don't get bogged down doom scrolling and all of that kind of thing. Spend a little bit of time painting. So as this cools off, because I was using my heat tool there, as this cools off, I'm looking at it and realizing, okay, there's some areas that could be a little bit darker, and I can go in with stronger color and I can reestablish some of the dark areas. Like along the cheekbone here and that sort of thing. And getting into some of the darks here on the jacket. I want to create some of the folds and things. So I want to make those a little bit darker, but in doing so, I want to try to be careful that I don't start making a cardboard beard. So I need to try to, try to maintain that roughness of the beard, the texture of the beard. I haven't gone into the detail of the beard or anything like that. I made that a little bit loose. I don't think that that's really the focal point of this particular subject. I could make it that way, but I don't think it needs to be. I'm drawn to the expression and the eyes and the mouth and the nose, those types of things. The hat, the hair, the jacket, those are secondary. So let's just try to establish where some of these shadows are. I think I have a little more in my paper than actually in the the photo. So coming in, building up some of these darks. Uh, I'm a bit of a drama queen. I like the darks and the contrast and all of that sort of thing. I think that can really draw your attention. And I like when people look at my paintings and they go, "That's watercolor," and they're very surprised that you can get these strong values in watercolor. It's a departure from the old watercolors that were very sort of pastel and that sort of thing. I like to surprise people with that. So, and there's a few creases and things up here. Again, it's not a lot of detail. I just want to suggest it. But there is a little bit of shine on this jacket. You can see that there's a little bit of shine there. So I can leave that original bluish gray, and just kind of paint around that. Kind of a squiggly line, isn't it? Not too much of a specific thing. It's a little wrinkled. Puckered, I guess. Not really wrinkled, but puckered. Really not getting too hung up on detail. But it's funny, I'll do something like this and I'll post it online and somebody will say, "Looks just like a photo." But it's because of the contrast. And, the realism in maybe just the eyes. And they'll say it looks like a photograph. When I did, I don't know if you can see it behind me, the dog, where is it? Right there. That little dog that I did. And the background was way out of focus. And it was all fuzzy and it was very loose and everything. And still, people said, "Oh, it looks like a photograph." And, it's that feeling of realism without actual realism. That's kind of cool, I think, in painting. I quite enjoy almost fooling somebody. Rinsing my brush and giving it a blot just so I can soften in some of these strokes that I just put down. I'm going to come in just to darken some of this down here. So you get the idea of the jacket, the texture, and things like that, without getting too bogged down with it. So let me dry that because I'll for sure put my hand in it. But I did that quite loose. Because watercolor is such close work, do you think standing back once in a while will help you see where the shadow and light on the portrait more easily? 100%. I really think that stepping away can reveal things that you don't see when you're up close. It's like looking at, when you're working on it, it's like you're looking in a microscope. you're looking at every flaw, you're looking at every hair, and you know, this little highlight here and that little highlight there, and so on. Step back, take a look, and see how it all works together. You could be like spending ridiculous amounts of time on some detail that really isn't relevant. So I want to make it feel like this fuzzy hat is over top of the ribbing. So I think I need to come in with more darks in some of these areas. Like, for example, right here. That is dry, right? uh, I'm going to soften this edge a little bit and soften this side too. And that helps this band look like it's a bit rounded. Right? As it comes to the front of the head, the more protruding part, it's going to be lighter. Could I use a little bit of white to look like snow on the head? Sure, I could. Do I need to? Probably not. I don't know. You guys can decide when you try and paint something like this. That'll be your decision, just like it's mine. And I think I'm just going to leave it the white of the paper, which I like best. Okay. Now, what else can I do to make this feel a little more dimensional? I'm feeling like these eyes need to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to take a little more burnt sienna and get these eyes a little bit darker. They're quite intense. So I'm going with a deeper brown here, and that's feeling a little bit more dramatic. I also feel like that white in the eye is almost a little too stark. I think it needs to be a little bit more cool, like a little bit more blued down or something. So when that's dry, I'll be able to come back in to do that. I do need to darken a few things like the nostrils here. And I really have to be careful of the shape on this. And anywhere that I feel like, oh boy, it should just be a little bit darker, I can come back in and retouch some of those areas. And then, you know, that stepping back that we were talking about, this would be a really good time to do that, right? Just to step away and step back. And it's amazing how stepping back will suddenly make you find stuff that you couldn't see when you're up close. It's quite remarkable how that works, but it does. Don't forget, you want to blend in some of these shadows. You don't want them to be too solid and on your top layer, I don't think. You know, you can refine things a little bit more, that sort of thing. But you can also see that coming back in on top of those first layers, it's kind of toned down the hard edges. It's like kind of softened things up a little bit. And I've got eyebrows still I have to do, so I'm gonna just make sure I get this this shape in here the way it needs to be before I commit to the brows. The actual hairs, they're actually a little hard to see in the photo, so I'm not going to try to zoom in. I often get some of my students in, they're in class and they will take their iPad and they're zooming in to see the little eyebrows and stuff, but then they're starting to put detail where it's not needed. So you can just get the general dark area for the eyebrows, and sometimes that's all you need. There might be, the hint of a couple of brow lashes or hairs up there, but overall, you probably don't need a ton of detail in these areas. Sometimes it ends up looking a little bit unnatural if you have, every hair defined. Sometimes it's better to leave a little bit of mystery, I guess, in your painting. I'm going to go a little bit more red in this tear duct here. Maybe just a little bit along this eye and in that corner. This is alizarin crimson that I'm using. Now I'm using this on top of this brown color, so it's not going to look as red as what you might be thinking. But if I were to put it on white paper, it would look very red. But because I'm putting it on top of something that's already dark, not a problem. Mix it in a little bit here. I think I'm going to even come in and darken where this lip area is a little bit more. Or where the shadow of the lip is, I should say. That was my finger brush, my finger eraser. Quick wipe with my finger. If I'm coming back to any of my skin tones, of course I have to have more burnt sienna in it. But yeah, I don't mind some of this alizarin crimson starting to warm things up a bit here. Now, when I did my portrait, my self-portrait last week, I kind of had some raw sienna in there as well. And for my complexion, because my skin is a lot lighter and it picks up a lot more of the warmer tones and the lighting conditions. I was doing this with morning light coming in the window, that sort of thing. So I was getting these warmer tones. This to me feels a little bit more like it's a midday, but in the shadow kind of thing. So the highlights don't feel quite as golden, shall we say. It doesn't mean that the next time you're doing somebody with dark skin like this, you wouldn't see that. Depends on the lighting. So if you're asking me what my go-to formula is for skin tone, it's like I don't have one, because it's going to change with every painting I do. Just toning down a few things here. I'm toning down a few things, and that makes the highlights look even brighter. So this the lightest areas of the nose are starting to stand out more just by doing that. Okay, I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to simply imply some of the brow now. I'm going to use neutral tint for this. And this is a little wet right here, so that's actually okay. I don't mind that. That's going to make this feel a little bit softer, which won't take away so much from the eyes. So I'm using what I would refer to as sticky paint. If you want it to stick on a wet surface, use sticky paint. So not a lot of water, not a really wet brush. Always be mindful of the dampness on your paper as well as the dampness of your brush. All right, so then the eyebrow starts to get a little bit hard to see, so I'm just going to soften some of these edges and let this sort of fade away. There's a little bit on this side. Then I just have my blotted brush and I'm softening as I go. All right, so that, obviously I could go on and on. We have a little bit of beard, a little bit of, not beard, but a few hairs that are underneath the mouth. I just want to add those in and make this feel like this this under part of the lower lip is receding into that crease we all have right here before we get to the chin. So this area down here should be a little darker. I'm gonna soften that in. Try to get it to sort of match on the other side here. And I'm going to dry it, and I'm going to add in a couple of little wisps of hair. And my scroller has stopped again. We've had no streaming issues today, so hopefully we've resolved the problem. Okay, so I'm going to put in just a few little suggestions of the little hairs in here. And I can take this brush and kind of splay it like this, and just sort of hint at some of this in here below the lip. And even in some of the areas next to the mouth where it's extra dark right in here. I can imply some of the texture there. And last but not least, I just want to put a little bit of blue in the highlight because it's looking a little bit too stark. So a little bit of blue in this highlight. And if I wanted to put a little of the copper color, like burnt sienna, into the zipper to show that that's a different color kind of thing, I could do that. But I'm not going to invest a lot of time with that one because the zipper's not that not that crucial. It's nice to know it's there and all, but doesn't need to be overly detailed. Just warmed up a little bit so it's not stark white. All right, so I think that that's going to finish up this one for today. Yeah, I could certainly put more layers on and really adjust all of this, but I think I've given you enough of the idea. I've been here for what, an hour and 45 minutes. So I'll let you get on with your day. Remember to listen to the birds sing once in a while. Make sure that you are focused on you, and don't spend all of your time watching the news. Make you sad. All right, take good care, everyone, and we'll see you next. Oh, actually, we won't see you next week. Next week, I am teaching an in-person workshop, so we're going to miss next week. I'm so sorry. I also want to remind those of you that are like in different countries or different time zones, we have a time change coming up. So the next time I'm back, don't forget that that our clocks are going ahead an hour this weekend. So there will be a different time. So take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Bye.